Hi everyone, I'm George, and in this video I will create a style step by step in giglad. And during this process I'm going to explain in detail some concepts and features of the style editor of giglad, which will hopefully help you understand the software better and being able to create your own style. The goal is to create a style that will sound like this. So if you wish to learn more, stay with me. First things first, I'm going to create a new style by right clicking here and select new style. This way it's gonna put the style exactly where I want it to be. I'm gonna give a name for my style. I'm going to leave the root chord as it is, C major 7th. It is always recommended to use chords that are described by at least 4 notes. Never use chords like C major or C minor because they only have 3 notes. The time signature, I can select one of the predefined here. I can directly type time signature here. In this case I'm not going to change it. The tempo, I'm leaving it as it is. It doesn't really matter, I can change it later and it changes real time when you're playing. And for the PPQ 768 is enough. I'm not going to explain in detail what is this. Please read the manual if you want to know more. And here I can predefine my sections, the style that the sections that my style will have. But it's not really recommended to do this here. It's not very convenient. I'm gonna leave this as it is, and I'm going to add my sections later. So I'm gonna press OK, and the software will redirect me into the style editor, and we'll have create one track and one section with one measure. Let's move on. So what I need to do is to add a few tracks, and each of these tracks is going to have a virtual instrument, and each of these instruments is going to play something in the C major 7th, which is a root chord, which later on the software will transform to the appropriate chord, the chord that you are playing live in the arranger. I can select a track by clicking here or here, and in this case automatically switch to the MIDI editor, where I can see each of this track in detail, the note events, and also at the bottom I can see some other events. One useful tip here is that I can go to the view and select lower left panel attached and clicked, which is going to detach the lower left panel and is going to make a different window which I can maximize, put it in a different screen, and help me more in the process of style editing. I'm not going to do this for the purposes of the video shooting. It's better to keep everything in one place. Then I'm going to right click in the section. I get some options here. I'm gonna select edit section to give a different name to my section. I don't like the name main. And I can select, right click in the measure. I get different options if I select the measure, which is going to be append measure, in order to add one more measure and have my section with 2 measures. And it's time to add the instruments. So what you would normally do in order to add an instrument in your track would be to click here and select an instrument, and that's all about it. You have your instrument in your track, which is going to play the notes that you're going to put in the MIDI editor. But I'm afraid I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to make things a bit more complicated because I'm using Contact, And in this video, it's a good opportunity to show how you can use Contact efficiently with giglad. So Contact is a heavy plugin, and although you can do the same, you can select Contact in each of your tracks. Let's add another track. Although you can select Contact for each of your track, it's not really recommended because you are pushing your processing power, and there is a much more efficient way of doing this. What you actually need to do is to create one instance of the Contact plugin which will contain multiple instruments, and then associate these instruments with tracks in giglad. So I'm gonna show you how you're going to do this. It's a bit complicated process. If you don't use Contact, or if you have a super duper device, you can ignore this and just add your instruments directly in your tracks as I previously showed. Alright, so I will click at the memory pool tab here at the bottom. This is the memory pool of the style. We have the global memory pool, which is applied all the time, and we have the memory pool of the style, which is only applied where the style is loaded. Let's maximize that. So I'm gonna click here and select my contact. So here I can see my plugin. Now what I need to do, especially in Mac, it's important to do that first, is to define your roots. So roots is actually the instrument. So I'm gonna have like drums, and I'm gonna add one more, which is gonna be my guitar, and I'm gonna add one more. I'm not sure if I will use this, but let's add it now and we'll see background like okay. So what I need to do is the drums to get triggered by the MIDI output channel 1, the guitar by the MIDI output channel 2, and the background by the MIDI output channel 3. And audio inputs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's very important to have all these things different, right? To send to different audio channels and to receive messages from different MIDI channels. If you have them, if you do something like that, you're going to have bad behaviors. Okay. So after I do that, I go to my plugin again. I can double click anywhere here. Don't double click here, it's not going to work. You need to double click somewhere here. Okay, and I get the plugin again, and I'm going to add my instruments. So I'm going to add my drums, and I'm also going to add my guitar. I'm going to add this guitar. This is a special guitar. We are going to talk about this later. And what I want to do is to ensure that I'm gonna route my instruments here in the same way I have routed them here. Okay, so if I check my drums, which is my first instrument, they receive messages from the MIDI channel 1, and they send audio to channel 1, 2. Okay, you can see 1, 2. If I look at my guitar, I can click here. It receives messages from the MIDI channel 2, which is what I want, but it sends the output to the same audio channel. I don't want that. I want to change that to 3, 4. Okay, so now I'm good to go. Now it's what I want. When you add more instruments here, it's getting more complicated. You need to do things all the time. I have found a very useful thing in Contact, which is called batch functions, clear output section and create. And if I do that, what it does, it creates every tracks in the mixer here, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. And in the order you have here your instruments, it routes them one by one. So it's exactly what you want. So later you just have to do the correspond correspond the instruments correct. So you need to understand, it's very important that giglad here does not know anything about what you are doing here. Okay, so if you do something here that does not match here, you're going to get bad behaviors, like the volume is not going to work, buttons mute solo is not going to work, it's going to be bad. So if you have behaviors that you don't understand, double check your routing, they must be the same. Okay, so now also, yeah, don't use this here because I'm not sure in which channel it sends, but we need to work with our MIDI key import. So if I click here, for example, now I'm going to listen and play here, I'm going to listen my guitar. And if I click here, I'm going to click to listen my drums. Okay. So in fact, we are done. This is what you need to do. You need to put multiple instruments here, route them correctly, and let giglad know how you have routed them. Okay, so after I do that, I can come to my track and say, okay, I want this track to use my drums. From the memory, pull the drums, and I want this one to use my guitar. Okay, so let's also rename my tracks in giglad to be meaningful. And now we are done. If I start putting MIDI events to these tracks, they're going to send it to the correct instrument in Contact and produce the correct sound. One thing that is very important to mention is that you should always work, when you play, you should always be in the timeline. You should always have this tab here selected. Because when you have this tab selected, then giglad gives priority to this thing, to the plugin here, instead of your tracks, and again, volumes and things like that may not behave correctly. So after you're setting up your memory pool, you switch here if you want to listen and see what you have. So this is it about how you set up your Contact to create one instance and have multiple instruments. Let's move on to add some events. So I'm gonna start with my guitar. I mentioned earlier that we are using a special instrument for my guitar. So this guitar here accepts chords and plays patterns. So if I play something here, that's because I have selected here drums. I need to select my guitar to listen my guitar. Something. Okay, it produces actual patterns. So I'm gonna select one pattern that I like. I'm not going to explain how this plugin works. You can learn about this in giglad, but I'm gonna select something that I want. Let's listen. Okay, it's good. So I have the pattern I want, and now I need to add my notes in the MIDI editor. So I'll go back and select my guitar. It's important to have the right track selected here. And I need to come to my MIDI editor and add the MIDI events. So there are two ways to add MIDI events. Well, actually there are three, but let's stay at two, and I will explain the third one later. There are two ways to add MIDI events. One is by selecting the pencil here and just start putting events. Okay, these are wrong events. So we got two modes here. We got the pencil and the arrow, which is like selection. So if I want to insert, I need to select the pencil. If I want to do things like move things around, select them and do stuff, I need to have this selected. Okay, so I'm gonna delete that. So one way again is to use the pencil and add the MIDI events, and the other way is to play live in the MIDI keyboard and write them. Because this instrument is we're not really going to play anything, it's going to play for us. I'm going to just use the pencil, and we'll see later how we can record live. So what I want to do is just add C note, E note, G note, and also the B note, which uh, now I have the complete chord C major 7th, which is the root chord. And if I play, okay, it plays the guitar, which is exactly what I want. And guitar is ready. Now, before we move on with the drums, it's a good opportunity to talk about the chord transposition algorithm. Okay, so let's explain that now. For this specific guitar plugin, it does not really matter what I'm going to show you right now, but let's assume for the purposes of this tutorial that you have some other kind of plugin. Let's assume you have a piano, for example, and you have placed these notes in your MIDI editor. Okay, you have played. Let's mute that. I only want to show you what I'm playing in the MIDI keyboard. So let's even make things simpler, and let's assume that you play these notes, okay, which is C, E, G, and form the C major, okay. So the question that arises, what giglad will do when you switch to a different chord when you're playing live, like let's say F major? Which notes exactly is it going to play? Because it can play either these notes, it can play these notes, you can play these notes, you can play these notes, or these notes form a valid chord, which is the F major. But which notes giglad will decide and play? So this is where the chord transposition algorithm comes, and it's you to decide. So it has some multiple options here, but we only care for the first one at this tutorial. So let's go one by one and explain them. So first you got bypass, okay? Bypass is a very important one. It doesn't do anything. In fact, it doesn't apply any transformation, it doesn't apply any transposition, and it's meant to be used for drums. So if one of your tracks is drums, you manually need to go to this tab here and select bypass. Otherwise, it's going to transform the drums and play different things, and you don't want that. So for drums, you always select bypass. The second option, free, we added this very recently, is like bypass, but it takes into account the global transposition that you have in the arranger. So for example, if you have played a melody like C, D, E, and you have applied +1, it's going to transport +1 and plays the same melody. Okay, so this is meant to be used for melodies that you don't want to apply any, you don't want to take account the chords at all. They play the same no matter what chord you're playing, but if you change the transposition from the arranger, you want this to be taken into account. Next we got the fixed, which is, so I got again this chord here. So fixed is going to try and find the notes that they are closest to the notes that you have in your MIDI editor, and they are valid for the other chord. So for the F major, it's gonna play this one, okay, because it's gonna play these notes because this is a valid chord in F major too, so it's gonna keep it, and then it's going to find the closest notes, which is in this case is this one, okay. So when you have selected fixed and you have played notes like this one, which form a C major, and your root is of course C major or C major 7, it's gonna do that. It's gonna play these notes. And the shift transposition just shift the, the notes up or down. So if you have U shift, it's going to shift the notes up and it's going to play these notes. If you have downshift selected, it's going to play to move down and play these notes. And if you have near shift, is going to find the nearest of these two, and it's going to play the nearest, which is in this case is this one again. Okay, so and for the U shift we have chord and bass. If your track plays some kind of is a chord, well, if your track is not bass, in fact, just select chord. If your track plays the bass, you can select bass here to take advantage of some other feature that giglad provides. But if you don't and you leave it chord for the bass, it's maybe won't make much difference to you. So these are the code transposition algorithms. Let's go back and unmute that and save and proceed to add our drum MIDI events. For my drums, I'm gonna click at my drums track, and then I can start adding again events using the pencil or playing live. But because I'm not a good drummer, I have found a better way of doing this. So I'm gonna click at my memory pool again, double click to show the plugin instrument. I can see my drums here. I'm gonna come here and find grooves, and the plugin offers some grooves, some patterns that I can use. I'm not going to waste your time. I have found something that I really like. And all I need is to bring this thing into giglad. Now this comes from a specific plugin, but all the plugins, all the decent drum plugins offer grooves, and there is a way. If there is a way to bring them in your DAW, there's gonna be the same way you can bring them into giglad. So for this plugin, all I need to do is grab this thing here and drag and drop it in the MIDI editor somewhere at the beginning. I'm gonna get this message. For this specific plugin, I know I need to select track 2, but in your case maybe you have to do some try and error. So I'm gonna select track 2 and I'm gonna press OK, and it brings the pattern with MIDI events into my MIDI editor. Okay, so this is another way of putting events into the MIDI editor. So what the plugin actually offers and what we are dragging and drop here is a file. Okay, so you can also drag and drop an external file here, an external MIDI file that contains events, and it's gonna do something similar. So this plugin, when I drag and drop here, it actually creates a file and drags and drop it here, and I need to select from this MIDI file which track I want to import. That was the message we saw earlier. And as I said, probably the plugin that you are using will have something similar, and you will be able to drag and drop the MIDI events into the MIDI editor of giglad. So now we're done. We go back to our timeline and let's listen. Okay, so what I did was to lower the volume a bit, and apart from the drums that I always keep central, the other instruments I just place them left and right, so to be more clear of what they're playing. And I'm gonna save again, and we are done. I will add one more track, which is gonna be my bass. And this time I will not select an instrument from my memory pool. Instead, I'm gonna use this list here, and I'm gonna select this plugin, which is a very good one, and it's also free. And I'm gonna try insert the events playing live. So I'm gonna turn the metronome on, and I'm gonna turn the record button on, In fact, I don't need the metronome because I have the tempo from the drums. It's gonna count 2 and I'm gonna press the play button. Okay, I probably need to add some quantize. So I'm gonna select this, press quantize, just the event zone selected. I can also select from the section blah blah blah. Well, anyway, I have selected now, so let's listen. Okay, it's not the best, but I'm sure you guys can perform better. Uh, Before I end this, I'm gonna change the code transposition algorithm to the. I'm gonna select U, in fact, because I'm already in play very low level notes and I don't want to go even below, so I'm gonna select U to always transport up, and I'm gonna say this is a pass, so it's not going to change much now, but it's gonna change the things later when you play live. So I'm gonna save, and we are done with the bass. Okay, so what I would normally do now would be to add a couple of more instruments in order for the style to sound better, to sound more filled, but I'm not going to do this because this video is already long and I think you already got the idea and I have more important things to show you. So before I forget, I need to come here to my CTA of the drums and select bypass. I didn't do that earlier, and it, as I have explained earlier, it's really required. So let's save that. And what I'm gonna do now is going to add my break, so, or my fill-in as it's called in the Yamaha styles. So I'm gonna right click in my section here, and I get a number of options: insert new section, append new section. Okay, insert is going to insert this before, and append is going to insert it after. So I'm going to append a new section, and I'm going to name it fill in or break. Let's name it break. And I can define everything from scratch, but really I don't have to do that because after I define my main my first section, the others are quite similar. So what I'm gonna do is select clone, so it's gonna and select clone verse. So I do that and I press OK, and I get a second break, a second section which is called break, and it's exactly the same, which I'm gonna modify a bit to make it sound like a break. Okay, so in fact I'm only going to change the drums to show you something. So I'm gonna come to my memory pool again and select my contact, and I'm gonna find fill in. Well, it's too much, but I don't spend time looking for a fill-in right now. So what I need to do first is, so I have the arrow selected here and I'm selecting these events here. I'm gonna delete them, and where's my memory pool? And I'm gonna, actually it's really too much. Let's hear this one. Okay, let's just put this one. Okay, so I need to drag and drop from here to here again. Okay, so let's listen. So I'm gonna select, so I can select either from here to listen the break, or I can click anywhere to start playing from this point, or if I double click on a section, it's going to place the timeline at the start of the section. Okay, so poof, poof. Let's listen. Okay, again, it's too much, so I want to, let's listen. Yeah, it's too much. So I'm gonna select this. And what I want to do is to decrease the velocity. So I have two ways of decreasing the velocity. The one is to select the events and do this from here. But if I do that, it's going to make the velocity the same for all the events. And I don't really want to do that. I want to select them. And if I grab one of them, it's going to decrease smoothly, you see. So let's try this one. Yeah, I didn't select the okay, let's also lower them a bit. Okay, let's save. But it's something missing, okay? It's a kimball at the end. And what I would like to do is when it ends to listen a kimball. So how I'm going to do that? Let's talk about this. If you observe the timeline, you will notice that there are some empty measures between the sections. So we got section verse with two measures and then one empty measure, and then section break with two measures. So these are not just here for visual purposes, just to keep some space between the sections. They actually serve a higher purpose. We call them echoes, and if I right click here, I get the option to remove the echo. So if I do that, there is not going to be any space or any extra measure. I'm gonna do that, and I also get the option to have more measures in my echo. So if I add one more, I get two. Again, I'm gonna do that. So why is this here? What does it do? So when the timeline, when you start playing, the timeline starts and goes and plays all the events that are here, okay? When it reaches at the end, it's gonna start back at the beginning. But there is another invisible timeline that keeps going in order to play the events that exist here in the echo. And why do we want that? Because in our example here with the kimball, we want the feeling to start and actually play when we reach at the end. So if I place a kimball here, poof, I'm putting this at the echo. What it's going to do is going to start playing blah 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 blah, and when it reaches here, it's going to play the kimball and goes back at the beginning, but probably in our case in a different section. But it matters not, because even if it switches into a different section, it's going to play the kimball. Let's listen. As I said, and I'm sure you guys understand how important this is. Now we went back to the beginning of the break, but usually this will not be the case. It's going to switch to a different section and it's going to keep play the kimball. Okay, so this is how you do this, and this is what these little fellows are doing here. Another benefit of echoes is this one. Let's add another track here. So let's add an event, dumb event. I don't even have an instrument, doesn't matter, just want to show you. So in this case, I have added an event, so it's going to play this note, and when it reaches at the end, it's going to stop playing this note, and instantly it's going to start playing it again. So maybe this is the behavior you want, maybe it's not. How can I achieve this event to goes on forever? It's very simple actually. I just have to drag and drop the event to reach the echo. So the way it's formed, it never goes off. It keeps playing and playing and playing and playing. And this is sometimes useful when you have a background instrument and you don't want to stop playing, you just wanted to keep playing. So I think we also covered the echoes. I hope you guys understood the purpose, and let's move on. Okay, I have deleted this track, we don't really need it. What I'm going to do is click here and select a menu section and name it chorus. And this time again I'm going to clone from the verse, not from the break. And what I would normally do is to make a few tweaks, maybe add a few instruments to make it sound a bit different. But again, I'm not going to do this. You already get the idea, I hope. What I do need to do is to modify my break a bit. So first of all, I don't want two measures, okay? I only want this measure here. So what I'm going to do is come here, click on this measure and delete it. So it's going to be just the fill-in. Okay. The next thing I want to do is right click again in the section. I get two important options. One option is a successor, which defines which section is going to switch after this section is finishes. So in this case, when break finishes, I want to switch to the chorus. So I'm going to select that. And mind that this is only when you're playing live with the arranger. If I here it just keeps looping because we are in edit mode, but in the arranger it's going to switch to the chorus. Okay. And one other thing that I need to do is come here and select can switch on any beat and not to first beat only, which is the default option. What this means is that even when the arranger plays I am at here, it's going to, sorry, if I play the verse for example and I'm here, it's going to instantly switch to the break and start from here. Okay, this is very important. For if you switch from the verse, because chorus for example has the option to first beat only. So if your timeline is here and you switch to chorus, it's going to finish this and then switch to chorus. But for the break, if I'm here and I press in the arranger break, it's going to instantly go here and press the play the break. Okay. So although it's not the style I have promised at the beginning, let's listen how it sounds in real time in the arranger.